Okay, so today I just want to do like a review with you on graphing in general. If you can see, I'm working out of the supplemental notes for sine, cosine, and there's some tangent on here also. And again, we're just going to review everything we know. I want to go back to our function. We know we've got an a. This is either sine, cosine, or tangent, and we have a b. We may or may not have a c, and we may or may not have a d. If you can tell me what each one of those parts play in this, you're really going to be a good grapher. So this is our amplitude. It affects the y because it's stretching or shrinking the graph. Again, we have to use our parent graph of sine, cosine, or tangent. B affects our period, and period has to do with when the cycle or the wave is done. Typically, it's 2 pi, but it might shrink or stretch, and that's with our x values. Again, period equals 2 pi over b for sine and cosine, or pi over b for tangent. The c shifts left or right, but it's opposite of what you think. So it's positive when it shifts left, and it's negative when it shifts right. So if it's shifting left or right, that also has to do with the x part of our t-chart. And last but not least, the d shifts up or down, and that is positive for up, negative for down, and this affects our y values. Okay? If you can understand all of these parts, you're going to be really good. So if you look at this first one here, I have an amplitude of 1/2. I'm using sine, and this is going to shift to the right 1/3 of a pi. So if I get my parent chart out, normally with sine we're at 0, 1, 0, negative 1, and 0. And at 0 pi, half a pi, pi, 3/2 of a pi, or 2 pi. Okay? Now, the easy side is usually the y side. So we're going to multiply everything by 1/2. This still stays 0. This stays a half, 0, negative 1/2, and back to 0. Okay? Now, the period did not change, so that's still 2 pi. However, I have to shift everything 1/3 of the pi. So it's like adding 1/3 to everything. So 0 plus 1/3 is 1/3. 1/2 plus 1/3 gets a little bit more complicated, so we can come back to that. 1 plus 1/3 is 4/3 of a pi. 3/2 plus 1/3 is a little bit more complicated, but 2 pi plus 1/3 is 2 1/3 pi, or 7 pi over 3. That should give you a good enough basis to move everything to the right. This is 7 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, and the others are in the middle. And instead of going as high as 1 and as low as negative 1, we're at pi over 3, half, negative 1/2, and end up shifting and squishing everything. My horizontal shift was to the right, pi over 3. The vertical shift was nothing because my midline is still at 0. Okay, my domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity, and my range is as high as 1/2 and as low as negative 1/2. Okay. All right, let's look at this one. This one's a little bit more complicated. If you remember, you have to pull out this number right here. So my amplitude is 5. I'm using cosine, but I have to factor out that 2. So think about the distributor property. 2 times what gives me 2x? 2x. 2 times what gives me a half? and that is 1/4. So if I distribute that back out, I'm back in here again. Okay? So the 2 is my b. That's going to affect my period. 2 pi over b, or my period is now at pi. It is going to shift to the left 1/4 of a pi, and it's going to shift up. This is my d by 3, my midline. So 1, 2, 3. My midline of my graph is going to be up here now. Okay? So we have our cosine parent chart. So that starts at 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. And we have our other values. Now, let's do, I always start with the y side. It always seems easier to me. Okay? So I'm going to multiply by 5 and add 3 to it. Times 5 plus 3 is 8. Times 5 plus 3 is 3. Times 5 would give me a -5 plus 3 is -2. And I'm back to 3 and 8 again. So my A and my D are over here. In here is my, actually all I need to know is my period and how I'm going to shift it. So my period is going to shrink to 1/2, and then I'm going to take all of those and shift them to the left, 1/4. So 0 minus 1/4 is now -1/4. 1/4 minus 1/4 is 0. 1/2 minus 1/4 is 1/4. 3/4 minus 1/4 is 1/2. And pi minus 1/4 is 3 pi over 4. So now I have the new points -1/4, 0, +1/4, 1/2, and 3 pi over 4. So I still have a period of 1 pi. It's just stretched across here. So now when I go to graph this, I'm going as high as 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Going as low as -2. And again, the cosine wave. Okay? My domain is still -infinity to +infinity, and my range goes from -2 to +8. And that's another nice thing about your T-chart is you're able to fill some of that in. Okay? Alright, if you look at this next one, we're talking tangent. Remember, that's always a little different. This is still our amplitude. Here we do still need to take out that 1/2. 1/2 times x is 1/2 of x, and 1/2 times pi is 1/2 of pi. So my period normally is pi over b, pi divided by 1/2, which is the same as pi times 2. So this time my period is going to be in 2 pi. It's going to shift vertically opposite, so left a pi, and the vertical shift is none. And the asymptotes we're going to look at when we graph here in a second. So typically, if I don't think about the shift for a second, my period is 2 pi, which means that one asymptote is going to be at -a pi, and my second asymptote is going to be at +pi. However, I'm shifting this whole thing left a whole pi. So this asymptote now gets shifted down here to the left at -2 pi. And this asymptote gets shifted to the left here at 0. So my new origin also shifted to the left, and these are my new turning points at -1/2 and -3 pi over 2. Three was my A, So my turning point is still going to be up 3 high and 3 low. Notice my period is still 2 pi long. So my asymptotes now are at negative 2 pi, negative 3, and 0, positive 3, every 2 pi. Okay? The rest of them, try on your own. That was a really good, hopefully, review for you. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important this part is up there. You really need to understand which each part of the graph is affected, what side of the XY chart is affected, and it'll really make you confident in your graphing. Okay, just kidding. I want to look at the back side too, because I want you to be able to put this into an equation now. So the first thing you need to do is decide, is this the sine wave or the cosine wave? And it is the sine wave. The next easiest part is probably the amplitude. So look at your midline. How high is this stretching and how low is this stretching? And it is going by 3 both times. The next thing I would look at is your period. Your period here is 2 pi. Well, that means that B was 1. It was not affected. Did your midline shift up or down? Or did your graph shift left or right? It did not. So the only thing left to put in is your function x. Alright, let's look at number 2. This is one cycle from here to here. Again, you decide sine, cosine, or tangent. And this is sine again. Look at your amplitude, as high as 3 and as low as 3. However, this time we were done in 1 pi. So if period equals 2 pi over b, and the period is 1 pi, what is b? Well, b would have to be 2 to get me a pi. Did anything shift up or down, or left or right? No, it did not. So that would be it. Now, if you look at number 3, your midline shifted. Again, here is one cycle. Your amplitude is from 2 to 5, which is 3, and 2 to negative 1, which is still 3, and this is still sine. The only thing this time that changed is your period is still 2, just like it was in number 2, but the whole thing shifted up 2 also. Now, what I would like to challenge you is I can see a cosine wave from here, right here, to here. Can you write the cosine graph? Well, first of all, it's flipped, so it would be a negative 3. The period is still only 1 pi. And how did it shift up? The midline shifted up by 2. So do you see how there's also a cosine wave inside the sine wave? And that's what's going to happen also with number 4. So give that one a try. I'm going to give you the quick answers here. If you took the sine wave, it's in pink. If you took the cosine wave, it's in green. There's also another sine wave positively if you kept that going. So, and there's a sine wave here, a cosine here. There's a lots of different waves in there, so this doesn't mean these are the only 2 equations also.